different prayers hit us differently at different times, I think. And for some, Misha Berach is something we might just end up reciting, and sometimes it's so personally attuned to where we are at, and sometimes I think of beyond my little circle of friends or family and think about healing in general and pain that folks are feeling out there. But I'm in that space a little bit, looking at where people are hurting, both in our community, where there are some that are really struggling, and certainly beyond within our country and in our world. And how do we say a Misha Berach? The rabbis are going to debate it to the very nth degree. Do we actually help God to intervene and fix these broken things, or is it something that we just are so compelled to find healing that we're going to raise up these prayers? I think both are right. It depends on who you ask, of course. But there's a sense that prayer can help. Once in a while, maybe a sermon. Mostly prayer, certainly music. So tonight, I'm feeling that healing kind of a tone because I see a lot of brokenness, and also because tonight is the 17th of Tammuz on the Jewish calendar. So a lot of folks might not be familiar about this particular Hebrew date. You see, it marks 3 weeks before the Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, which marks the destruction of the holy temples in Jerusalem. Both temples, there's a first and a second. The first one is destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 before the Common Era, and the second one by the Romans in the year 70. And these 3 weeks, the 17th of Tammuz, according to our sages and their history, it's when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. So it was kind of like the beginning of real trouble. If Jerusalem was going to fall, in the ancient world, most of the time when the temple is going to be destroyed, the God is destroyed with it. But that didn't happen with these kind of stubborn ancient Jews. God could not be contained in a structure. So while everybody else, all of these other ancient tribes, they have all kind of died away, for the Israelites, their God cannot be destroyed. The temple can, and they can be exiled, and all of these terrible things can happen. For them, this was their sense of the way we feel about the Holocaust, the Shoah. But for so many centuries before the Shoah, Tisha B'Av was the ultimate calamity that could happen to the Jewish people. Twice. Both are marked on Tisha B'Av. And these 3 weeks that lead up to it are filled with angst amongst traditional Jews. A real sense of preparing for a day of mourning. In fact, all of the days, the entire day of Tisha B'Av in 3 weeks, on the 9th day of Av, the whole day is a day of mourning. All of those customs are in place, including fasting. In fact, for the 17th of Tammuz, which begins tonight and goes through tomorrow, it's also a fast day. From dawn until sunset, until sundown, traditional Jews will fast. Now, I don't fast because fasting for me is about taking ownership of my sins, of where have I gone wrong. And traditional Judaism says that the temples were destroyed as a punishment, that God actually sent those enemies to destroy the temple. And for some, that makes a lot of theological sense. Not so much for me. Never really has. I recognize that it's a day of sadness, a day of mourning, a day of reflection, a day that even according to tradition, even if the teachings say that the temples were destroyed because of these terrible things, we have something to learn from them. For the first temple, the rabbis say it was because of avodah zarah, which is idolatry. The second was immorality in general, especially in terms of sexual relationships, gilui arayot. And the third is going to be bloodshed, the shedding of blood, letting it seep into the soil, shifchut damim. The second temple, supposedly, according to our rabbis, there was all of these great things that were happening. It was learning and people were observing mitzvot, but there was still something that was going on. Why was the second temple destroyed? They said because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred. a hatred that has no root. It's just because I hate. It's just because that's what I'm feeling. And if I hate for no reason other than I don't like you, and you're not like me, and I'm different, that's why the second temple was destroyed. I think we're coming across those themes. I feel like there is this baseless hatred that is out in our world, but it has become so strong again today, so thick that most of the folks that I get to talk to, my congregants, feel all of this woe as if the 3 weeks have started already some months ago, and Tisha B'Av is feeling something like every day. But here's the thing about Tisha B'Av. As much as there's a day of mourning and remembrance, it also is about hope. Because in Jewish tradition, the Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. The Messiah, the individual that is supposed to change the world for the better, is born on the saddest day on our Jewish calendar. What an incredible message that is. In fact, after Tisha B'Av, in 3 weeks, we're going to have 7 different Shabbatot, all leading up to Rosh Hashanah, and they all have a special reading for the Haftarah, the readings from the prophets. They're all going to come from Isaiah, and they're all about comfort. That after a calamity, God's going to comfort God's people. God's going to take care of us, watch over us, be there for us when we are feeling so very lost. So let's talk about this for a second, this baseless hatred. Our country has had an amazing story, and there are incredible high points, which is why you'll know from me, I share Jewish prayers on our Veterans Day, and folks who are being deployed are in our Misha Berach list. I love this country, even though I can be honest about where we have failed and where we have gone wrong. A country that has supported slavery and Jim Crow, Japanese internment, systemic disempowerment of women, a trail of tears, allegations, there's some controversy if this is true or not, about smallpox blankets being given to Native Americans and reservations years ago. We can go on with different kinds of tragedies, and certainly racism today, but I think you get the point. But there have also been amazing things where we all have seen encounters of love and grace and hope and strength and resilience and grit amongst the American people. We had this moral minion the other day. A couple of you were there. We gathered outside of the ICE detention facility in Aurora, and we prayed. We davened mincha, the afternoon prayers, and a few of us spoke, and one of the things that I shared was about my own grandmother. And her name, I want to share, her name is Dorothy Lichtman, Dottie, Grandma Dottie. And she came to this country when she was 11 years old from what is now Lithuania. At that point, it was still Poland. And one of her proudest moments of her entire existence was the day she became a citizen of the United States of America. It was 1978, and she was 67 years old. She loved this country. She was proud and grateful, so grateful for letting her and her mother come in, enter this country from leaving then Poland, somehow getting to Antwerp, when we have no idea how, she would never talk about it, and leaving Belgium and Antwerp and coming to New York with nothing, no English, no money, and no skills. So then I asked the question, why did her mother, Leah, who is pretty fierce from what I hear, why would she bring her 11-year-old daughter to make such a journey, go through such risk? Why come to this country? The year before, for my grandmother, there was a pogrom. And after that pogrom, while many people left like her and her mother, only 20 years later, the town was going to be annihilated. Everybody went to a different camp. The town doesn't exist anymore. It's not on any map. But after that pogrom, when my grandmother was hidden in their home beneath the floorboards, safe after this riot, they made their journey and they wanted to find safety, security, not just a better future, but an opportunity to live. And thank God Leah brought her. We know what would have happened if they stayed. I think of my grandmother these last few weeks as our Department of Health and Human Services are holding over 2,000 children kind of as prisoners. And I can't think of another way to say it. I just can't. It's not illegal to come to the United States and ask for asylum. It shouldn't be something that you could be punished for if it's not safe to be in your own home. And here I'm going to say that it's unjust and indecent and immoral to capture and separate young children from their loved ones who are trying to bring them to safety, just like it was true for my grandmother, and I know for so many others. Now, we have seen this before in our own history. The other thing I shared at this moral minion was the story about Pharaoh. Pharaoh didn't like that there were all of these Israelites coming up. In fact, the word that they use in the Torah for being prolific, that they were multiplying, they were increasing in number, was sharatz. The root letters of sharatz, that letters, it's about swarming like reptiles. That's what Rashi is interpreting it as. We don't see that word used for other people flourishing. We see it about bugs in the Torah. So that swarming is increasing and people are feeling threatened. And Pharaoh is talking about our ancestors as bugs and reptiles. And when you're not human, then you can be put in slavery. It's kind of that simple. And if you are not human, then it's easy to send you to a camp and have you be set up for extermination. If you are not human, you can be caged. And we have a problem when there are references and echoes of looking at somebody else as if they are less than human. That, I think, is the challenge that we see. Now, I want to tell you another piece of Torah. The other piece of Torah is about Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve take the fruit, and then we know that they get in trouble. And God is asking this question that we have been asked all the time when we come into a Jewish communal setting. The word is ayeka. Where are you? God wants to know where Adam is, as if God doesn't know. But God isn't asking ayeka to find out where are you standing. It's where are you as a human being? Oh, it's not about me. Eve did it, right? Eve did it. That's my favorite bumper sticker. I've told you before. Eve was framed. Eve did it. Which brings us to another bad history. We look at Cain and Abel. What's going on? Am I my brother's keeper? Where are you? I have no responsibility in this. I'm not going to be honest. God asks Abraham, where are you? Hineni, I am here. I'm right here, and I'm ready to get to work. That's who we are as a Jewish people. Folks who have been seen by others as less than human and who have been asked by God, where are you? And the answer is, Hineni, here I am. This place has an amazing and incredible and an awful history. We can't let go of either one of them. Both of them are going to give me enough compassion and insight to step forward and help. We have separated children in the past here when we put them up for sale in slave markets in Charleston, and it is unacceptable. We've separated children when they were taken from their Native American families in order to get, as one general of those days have said, in order to get the Indian out of them and make them men. And we would say that is unacceptable. And during World War II, our country put its own citizens of Japanese descent, not the Germans or Italians, just the Japanese, into internment camps based on their race, and that too is unacceptable. And I'm going to say to you, a zero-tolerance policy, separating children from parents fleeing for their very lives, is another act of aggression toward people of color that I find, and I hope you do too, find it as unacceptable. So here's the next thing I need to share with you before we end. The next thing is rabbi. I'm often asked, do you have to talk about this from the bima? Rabbi, can't you keep politics out of this? Rabbi, this is going to divide us. So here's what I have to say to you. I'm not talking politics. I'm not talking parties. I'm not talking about one particular president or another. It's not about being fair towards President Trump. Who said I never protested against President Obama? Whoever thought? I wasn't here yet. You don't know what I said. I said plenty. The question isn't, who am I supporting or who did I vote for? Or who do I want you to vote for? That's not what we're talking about in this space. We're talking about behaviors, and we're talking about hineni. We're talking about here I am. What am I doing here? So this is what I want to answer with. Rabbi, do you really have to talk about this from the bima? In 1963, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who never had a congregation, he could say anything he wanted. But he said this. Now, this is also in his language, and it's also representing 1963. We don't say all of these words as we do today, but I'm going to keep to his text, and I think you'll see it in the spirit in which it was shared at the time. Rabbi Heschel said, the plight of the Negro must become our most important concern. Seen in the light of our religious tradition, the Negro problem is God's gift to America, the test of our integrity, a magnificent spiritual opportunity. It's not enough for us to exhort the government. What we must do is to set an example, not merely to acknowledge the Negro, but to welcome him, not grudgingly, but joyously, to take delight in enabling him to enjoy what is due him. We are all pharaohs, or all slaves of pharaohs. It is sad to be a slave of Pharaoh. It is horrible to be a Pharaoh. Daily we should take account and ask, what have I done today to alleviate anguish, to mitigate evil, to prevent humiliation? Let there be a grain of profit in every single person. Let there be a grain of profit in every single person. The rabbis taught b'makom she'en anashim lehishtadel liyot ish. In a place where nobody is acting like a human being, you have to strive. You have to stretch. To really stretch, not just to exist, but to be the human being created in God's image who recognizes the godliness of another. I think it's time to stretch.